But I want to talk about something from this aspect, and that is how sometimes we don't allow ourselves to be happy. And there's a lot of different reasons for it. Sometimes it's for like self preservation. Sometimes it's because we don't feel like we're worthy to be happy. But we're going to try to break that down. We're going to try to talk about it here now. So the first reason, but it's time now for the discussion topic of this week's episode. And it's one that I'm actually really excited to bring you guys. It's one that I've kind of thought about. I've suffered some myself, which always tends to be the best ones on this podcast when I talk about things that I've suffered from as well. And so even in like what I talked about, and I tweeted it out earlier today as of this recording, and I talked about not being content in your content, right? But even to take it a level deeper than that, I do want to say that I do think that very often in this creative space, we fall into not really ruts, but we fall into like a space of just being happy with what, or being, I'm sorry, not happy, being content with what we create because it checks off the boxes of what is expected of us, or it gives us content. And sometimes we just are being content rather than trying to push the boundaries. But those are things that we'll talk more about in the series that we're doing to help creators and everything. But I want to talk about something from this aspect, and that is how sometimes we don't allow ourselves to be happy. And there's a lot of different reasons for it. Sometimes it's for like self-preservation. Sometimes it's because we don't feel like we're worthy to be happy. But we're going to try to break that down. We're going to try to talk about it here now. So the first reason that I want to talk about that we don't allow ourselves to be happy sometimes is that it disrupts how we view ourselves. We so often are used to viewing ourselves through the lens of what we've been through rather than where we're going, or rather than what we're currently at. We'll not allow ourselves to be happy in the times that we're in, or in the space that we're in now, because our identity for so long has been the person who has battled, or has pulled themselves out of things, or who had to grind over and over and over again. And because that's just who we now look at ourselves as the grinder, as the hard worker, as the person who fights through adversity, that we don't stop and just allow ourselves to be happy because we're looking at the next thing that needs to be our adversary, or we're looking at the next thing that we need to list as an obstacle, and we don't stop and let ourselves build up time to just be happy in where we are now, the fact that we made it through whatever we had to go through. So that is number one. And I think that if we're honest with ourselves, if I'm honest with me, there was a time where I was like that as well, specifically with the whole working two jobs thing. When I first moved out on my own, when I first started having my family, I worked two jobs, damn near 20 hours a day for years. I think I did myself like that for like 3 or 4 years, and my body was just couldn't handle it anymore to a degree. But that had become my identity for so long that I had two jobs that I just kept on to that. Like there was a time where I was making more at one job than I had made at like two jobs the last 2 years. But because something in me, I was like, I have to have a second job. I'm going to work it overnight at a gas station. So I was businessman, financial person during the day, and working at a gas station overnight, because that had just become my identity, was the hard worker. And I didn't allow myself to realize I don't have to work this hard anymore. I pulled myself up this far. I built myself up and my career up this much that I am now sitting at a job that I make more money than what I probably ever thought that I'd be able to make without a college degree. But because being a hard worker had become my identity, I thought that I had to keep those two jobs, otherwise I wasn't doing enough. Do you have to think about stuff like that? How much, if you're being honest with yourself, how many times have you put yourself in a similar situation just because something had become your identity? It became how you identified yourself. It became how people recognize you, is that, oh, that's the hard worker. So you felt like you had to keep that up because that was just your identity, rather than sit back and take time and allow yourself to be happy at where you had come from so far into your career. So think about that. Number two, in this, of why or how we keep ourselves from being happy, is that allowing ourselves to be happy challenges us. It challenges, and it makes us have to let down our defenses, because we have become so closed off. And this goes out a big part to my sisters, to our Black women. We have become so closed off and so comfortable in being that hardened shell, that the thought of being truly happy and letting that guard down and just taking in that happiness, something's going to come. It's going to be the other shoe's going to drop. If I let myself be happy for a minute, something's going to happen to completely tear down everything I'm happy about. So I might as well not even give it the chance and just keep my defenses up. Think about that. That probably happens more than what we allow ourselves to really admit that it happens. But you got to stop and you got to think about if you're doing and causing that for yourself. Are your defenses keeping you from allowing yourself to be happy? Really take a time to sit back and evaluate that and think about that statement. Our defenses become like armor, right? There are armor that guards us against everything that could possibly hurt us or could get in our way or could cause pain for the ones that our loved ones, or cause us to not feel like we're being rejected, or that something or that anything like. But when you build up those defenses and your defenses become challenged, we feel like we're doing something wrong. It becomes feeling like unnatural. But as I have always said, when you have your guard and your defenses up that much, not only are you blocking out or defending against some bad things, but sometimes you're also keeping good things from coming in. So sometimes, like, allowing ourselves to be happy because it challenges what we've now become, but what has become our wall or our armor, that we don't let that down because we think that that's also a form of weakness, or we're not going to be prepared for the next thing that happens. Number three, of how we don't allow ourselves to be happy. Sometimes it just causes us anxiety. And it may seem crazy to hear that and say, how does being happy cause someone anxiety? Well, when you think about it, it's completely possible. Again, that goes back to kind of what I talked about before, is that if we are in such a place where we've just become used to being on the defense, where we've become used to being guarded, the thought of that of that armor, that shield going completely away, and us just relaxing in our happiness, it can cause you to go fucking crazy. Or even, let's not even say the fact of letting our defensives down. Let's say you're not even someone who has that armor, that defense up, but you allow yourself to be happy. Now that's causing you anxiety because now you're worried about how long that happiness is going to last. Is the happiness forever? Is it going to be challenged? And it's not going to be long before we either mess that up for ourselves or something comes along and messes it up. So we don't even really allow ourselves time to take in that happiness because we're too worried about what may possibly come and take that happiness away. So think about that when you're thinking about your guard up and everything else. Like, you really could be blocking out so much more. Number four, sometimes it makes us feel guilty. Sometimes because of the other people around us that don't have the ability to be happy, or sometimes when you do sit around and allow yourself to be happy in the things that are going on, you start thinking, why me? What have I done to deserve to be the one to be happy, where there are so many people who are unhappy, or so many people who are going through stuff? That, like, it's like a version of survivor's guilt when you think about it that way. And oftentimes, like, we'll allow that guilt that we feel to make it be like, well, I don't deserve to be happy. And then you still deal with shit that you don't need to be dealing with, or you don't, like I said, like, this whole thing is sitting in your happiness, just enjoying the happiness that you've earned and that you've worked yourself to. So when you start feeling guilty about being happy, you're keeping yourself from really enjoying your own happiness. And it's something that, I would like to think that it happens more in the Black community, that we feel that way, because very often, like, how many of us have come, like, people who have come from harder backgrounds, and then they think they're the ones that made it out. But what did they deserve? What did they do that caused them to deserve to make it out? And they don't really ever sit in the happiness of the fact of what they made themselves do. And then we've talked about that generational trauma and the PTSD sometimes that just happens in the Black community naturally, depending on where you grew up at. And that is very real. So very often you won't allow yourself to be happy when you think about stuff like that. Number five that we have to talk about here. Sometimes being happy forces us to face pain, right? Pain that we have buried away, or that we've kept throwing under the rug for so long. And to truly be happy, sometimes we have to face that head on. So to avoid doing that, we just will stay in a place of being unhappy, because it's better than facing what we've been through. And that's a whole different form of trauma. Sometimes you do need therapy for it. Like I've said before on this podcast a lot, that sometimes, there's nothing wrong with, not sometimes, there's nothing wrong with seeking therapy to get yourself to a mental place. But that is something that we go through in minority communities. I'm not saying that it just affects us, but yeah, we often don't really want to face what we went through. I knew somebody, and I'm not going to mention any names because I'm not going to throw them under the bus, but what they went through as a child with like being poor and having to share bathwater with their family, um, they almost didn't ever want to think about it. Um, and for them to talk about that or to admit that or to really face how that made them feel, the fact that they had to grow up that way, they just kept running from it. And in the process of just keep running from it, running from it, running from it, you've now, there are things in that's gone on to affect possibly in their life that originates just from them not dealing with that one thing, but because of course they haven't taken the time out to really face the pain of what their upbringing was, not really be resentful for, but just to realize, look, this was not okay. Yeah, it was I didn't know any better, but now I feel so much pain and being ashamed over it that they didn't face that, and then that goes on to cause trauma in other places. But again, um, it's hard to face pain for all of us. I think some of us have built up enough resiliency to where we're better at it than others. But I don't think that it ever stops being hard to face pain. Well, I mean, I say hard. I don't I don't think that it's ever something that people necessarily welcome is just to face pain, but we learn to deal with it. We learn to make it through it because we ultimately want to be happy. So ask yourself, are you fighting your own happiness because you don't want to face the pain of some of the stuff that you went through in life? Um, but as we do, I just gave you those reasons of how sometimes we fight our own happiness. Now we're going to talk about the flip side of it. What are some things that we can do to overcome it? One thing is don't go through it alone. We're not put here on this earth to go through things alone, whether it means through friendships, whether it means through relationships, whether it means through marriages, whether it means through uh, being a parent. We're not meant to go through this journey of life alone. A big thing of what we do and what we're here for, the reason why we're sociable creatures, is because we're not meant, like, some people are very well at going through it alone, dealing with stuff alone, and don't need attachments. But for the majority, we're not meant to go through things alone, whether that means having someone you can vent to, whether it means just having someone that's going to hold you accountable, or someone who just helps you stay focused on your goals. Don't go through this stuff alone, and hopefully it can help you stop fighting your own happiness. Second thing, on being more proactive rather than just identifying, is recognize the pattern that you go through. Recognize whether it's good or bad patterns. If it's good patterns, then you can use that to hopefully apply to other things in life. If it's bad patterns, learn those patterns that you're going through, so then you can try to fight out that self-destructive behavior. We get caught up in patterns just because they become routine, they become the norm, and we normalize them in our head. And in the long run, we're really just either hurting us or hurting the people around us, which adds to being self-destructive, and it doesn't allow for you to feel happy. So that's another way that you can battle that. Another pointer of what you can do is find ways that you can get rid of the negative influences from your past, whether it was something that someone who really thought they were telling you good advice, or whether it was something that you learned from seeing some of your parents' bad behaviors or some other people around you's bad behaviors, is identify those first and differentiate those negative behaviors from positive ones, and then try to take the positive qualities and emulate those more, and break from those negative influences that happened in your past. And yeah, that takes steps. It's not just as easy as just saying, oh, well, this is one. All right, we're going to eliminate that. We're going to do this instead. Sometimes you have to build up, kind of like muscle memory. You have to build up and break that routine and break that cycle. And I think that we are the first generation who, I say this all the time, that understands the importance of mental health. This is one of those steps in that. Second thing, I'm not second thing. The next thing, stop taking the mentality of being a victim. Let me say that again for the congregation. Stop taking the mentality of being the victim. You have to take control of your own life. You have to, the past is no longer in your control, no matter if it was something you did or something that people did around you. At the end of the day, you are now an independent adult who is free to make your own decisions, and you have to own those decisions. So stop playing the victim in everything that you do. Stop looking at things as if everything happens to you and wonder what you can have done to make what you could have done or what you will do to make the situation better. The way that you react is always 100% on you. And unless someone's holding a gun to your head and telling you to act a certain way, they're going to shoot you. That action that you do is 110% on you. Even then, if someone's holding a gun to you, that's still your choice to do that because you can take the bullet. But seriously, so many people, so many adults, and I mean adults, like well into their age, will still take the mindset and the standpoint of being the victim in everything that happens to them in life. That if you have to identify, like, that's one thing that I don't want around me. People who are constantly the victim in everything that happens or talks about their life as if they don't have any control over it, or if they're a bystander to their own actions. I don't want those people around me. You have to take ownership of your actions. You have to take ownership in the choices that you made to get to the place that you are. You're not always a victim of circumstances. Sometimes you're just a victim of your own choices. Your own choices. So many people and that's why I hate hearing the thing where people like in relationships say, "Oh, I wasted my time." No, you didn't waste your time. Now, you may have not made the best decisions ever, but as long as you're growing from that, you didn't waste that time. There's no time. There's not a single thing that you can say that you wasted all your time for, because you should at least grow from it or learn something from it. Even if it's learning what decisions not to make, you're not always the victim. I can't stress that enough. Stop being the fucking victim and passenger in your own life. Last thing here, very last thing before we go home, is recognize that you're powerful and resilient and capable. Most of us are capable in one way or another of getting through most things that happen in life. It's just like you hear all these people who are now saying because of COVID-19, first mention of it in the podcast, by the way, you hear all these things with COVID-19 saying that the world will never be the same. And I think people doubt the resiliency of us as humans. Just like with 9/11. So many people said they would never fly again after 9/11. Most of those people are flying again like nothing ever happened. Yeah, the way that we do it now changes. No one's saying that. And the way that you do certain things may change. But you're capable and powerful enough to make it through almost anything that life throws at you. If you're not dead, you made it through, thus meaning you're powerful enough to overcome it. Stop allowing setbacks to completely unravel everything that happens in your life. A setback is just that. It's a setback. It's not a hard stop. It's not a finale. It's not the end. It's a setback. And as long as you're still breathing, you have the time and the ability, and you're capable enough to learn how to overcome it. It depends on the amount of time, the amount of attention, the amount of work may be different depending on the situation. But more times than not, you are very well capable of getting through it. That's how we are going to get out the way of our own happiness. That's how we're going to stop our own happiness from coming. All those things. We're going to go ahead and recap it again. Don't go in it alone. You need help. We need help as people. Recognize the patterns that you may be caught in, both negative and positive, and do with those what you need to do. Find ways to differentiate the negative influences in your life from the positive ones, or how to build positive ones. Don't take mentality of a victim. Stop being a fucking victim in your own life. And lastly, recognize that you're powerful and you're capable enough to make it through whatever the hell you're going through. These are all steps in how to go through that challenge that we call life. And this is the Awakened Soul. This is this is my purpose for being here, is to help people through this and let them know that you're capable of doing it. You can do it. Sometimes it's just going to take time. But that's it. That's all I got for you guys this week. I am your host, CEO Haize. This has been another episode of The Awakened. So I want to thank you guys for all the support that you showed with the episode with my daughter, for the episode with my daughter. Maya has loved seeing the feedback, love all the screenshots people have sent me of them actually watching the episode, the video. I told you guys this was a one that you definitely wanted to watch the video for. Some people even went to the podcast and went and watched the video later. So I thank you guys for that. That's my baby girl. Most people who have either seen who've consumed that episode one way or another have all said, yeah, that's your daughter. And it's I think having her on that platform and us having that conversation was needed, because it allowed me to come back and see some things that I need to be doing better with her as well, as far as like making sure she feels supported and she feels heard. Sometimes I immediately can fall into the mindset of, well, me and her are the closest, we're going to be good. She'll tell me if something's wrong. And I'm noticing that that's not always the case. Even though we are extremely close, and as she said there, she feels she can talk to me, there's still times where I need to be actively going out and trying to get her to open up more and more than just thinking, oh, she'll come to me when she's ready. So it was a great conversation to have. I know a lot of other parents have heard that one and said that it's going to cause them to have like conversations with their children. You know what? And it's something that it bothered me. Let me not say it bothered me, but it's something I definitely noticed that after that episode went up, other creatives are now doing episodes with their kids, and I was like, I see I inspired you guys there. But it really, if that's the whole purpose of it. If that episode has caused you now, whether you're a creative or not, sit down and have that conversation with your children, then it did its purpose. I know I got a lot out of it, hell, and I was in the conversation. So I just want to thank you guys for your continued support of the episode, for the continued support of the Awaken Soul podcast. What we got coming in 2020 is just going to be major. I got a pretty big interview lined up. I got a couple of pretty big interviews lined up, actually. So we're working here, man. We are working our asses off. Breaks Media, Pretty Lit Conversations is a new member of the Breaks Media Network, so make sure you go and check them out. We're trying to get the website updated, so they're listed there. Also, Poetry After Dark is another member of the Breaks Media now. Make sure you're checking out that podcast as well. Make sure you're listening to it after dark too. It really highlights the thing, especially if you listen to it with your partner as well. We're continue differentiating the content that we bring here. Even on the Awaken Soul, like I said, what I'm doing now with the series, the live series on helping people with their content and their marketing, all just passionate stuff. I don't want to work with anyone who's not passionate, period, point blank. So that's it for this episode. Again, I think I said it, but if I didn't, you can follow me at CEO Haize, at CEOHAIZE. Follow the podcast at The Awaken Soul or at Awaken Soul Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, theawakensoulpod@gmail.com. And lastly, if you want to send us a voicemail, you can do so at 614-547-2039. We are the number one podcast, the number one network around, period, point blank. If you got a problem with it, you can see me. We out this mug. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Breaks Media.